Hey there, I'm Bill Straub with ModernThirst.com, and I have a really fun tasting for you here today. This is going to be a three-way Brown-Forman tasting. And all three of these are media samples graciously sent to me by the Brown-Forman Corporation. And one of them is brand new as of today. So the first one is the 2020 version of Old Forester's Birthday Bourbon. You may be familiar with this, you may not be. George Garvin Brown founded George Foreman. It was the first bottled whiskey. And this comes out once a year to celebrate his birthday. This year is a 10-year, 98 proof Old Forester bourbon. There were 95 barrels of this chosen. I'm not sure how many bottles that works out to, but it's not a ton. Decent amount, but not a ton. For the longest time, this was a really popular bottle for locals here in Louisville to pick up when it came out every year. And maybe 7 or 8 years ago, other people kind of discovered it too. What you'll find with a lot of the folks like me, a lot of the talking heads and the YouTube folks, there tends to be some divided opinions on them. Everyone thinks the old stuff's always better than the new stuff, and there's been theories on how the odd years of this were better or the even years of this were better. Regardless, I've never had a bad Old Forester birthday bourbon. I've had some that were really good, and I've had some that were not particularly better than most of the other Old Foresters I've had. But this is the 2020. Again, it's a little lower proof than it's been recently, and it's a little younger. It's been upwards around 12 years, I think, a couple of times. But so I'll be tasting that one for you. The second one I'm very excited about. This is brand new today. This is the 150th anniversary release of Old Forester. So this one, it's going to be released. This is obviously a sample, but the regular bottles that you'll buy are going to be the full-size tubes, full-size bottles. And there's 3 different batches of these. Now, batch number 1 is Jackie's Ican, their master taster. It's her favorite. And that one is supposed to be fruit forward, which is kind of what her palate tends towards. This one, she explained it as being kind of grainy and a little bit of spicy on the spicy side of it. This is batch 3. There were 53 barrels of this one. It's 126.8 proof, so it's barrel proof. So it's going to be the same mash bill between the two of these, and the difference is going to be age and proof. They do not mention an age on this one. They said that Chris Morris planned this well in advance and he laid the barrels down. My guess is anywhere from 5 to 6 years, somewhere in there. And the last one is the big daddy of the room. It's always been a great whiskey. This is, I think, the 3rd release of it. It's the King of Kentucky for 2020. This is a huge whiskey. Always been very fruit forward, very flavorful, very powerful. Kind of reminds me of their version of a George T. Stagg. But this one is 14 years old, and it's 130.6 proof. There were 1,900 bottles of this one, so all these very limited. They're going to be hard to find. Thank goodness I got these media samples from Brown-Forman, or I probably wouldn't have but 1 or 2 of them. Luckily, they don't expect you to lie or anything for them. They expect you to give an honest review, so that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to start out with the birthday bourbon. We're going to work our way for you guys watching now. It's going to be left to right. So birthday bourbon, followed by the 150th anniversary, followed by the King of Kentucky. Do that for a reason. King of Kentucky is the highest proof. It's the oldest. It's also the one that's a different mash bill. This follows the early times mash bill, which is a little bit lower rye. Both of them have around 10% corn. I believe the early times mash bill is around 11% rye, somewhere in there. And the Old Forester mash bill is around 19% rye. And you may or may not know, but early times has been sold to the Sazerac Corporation. So they kept the rights to the King of Kentucky name. I don't know if they're going to keep the same stocks for it. I don't know if they're going to keep using the same mash bill for it. But regardless, it's been a personal favorite of mine and really popular amongst a lot of collectors in the last few years as well. But it's also really hard to find. So with the birthday bourbon, when these have been really good, I've got a little bit of banana on these. I tend to get a lot of pie crust, things like that. It tends to be a very rich bourbon, even at a lower proof. And by lower proof, I mean relatively compared to these cast strength bombs here, because this is 98 proof, which anymore I think tends to be on the medium to low end. It used to be considered high. Anything upwards of 95 and higher used to be kind of high for most bourbon folks. But things have really trended to a higher proof, so you get a more full flavor and less dilution when they put it in the bottle. Lots of vanilla, custard, a little bit of banana on this too, a little banana nut bread maybe. It's nice. It's a nice nose. You can see I've tasted all of these before. This won't be my first sip of any of these or my first smell. I'm about halfway through this sample. And I like to taste things 2 or 3 days at a time because it allows you to make sure that your palate hasn't been colored by something you ate earlier, or the fact that your nose might be stuffy. It kind of gives you 3-day kind of running average of it. But this one on the nose, I get black pepper, I get a little bit of banana, I get some of that baked goods. I don't really get a lot of fruit on this, which I've had before. Maybe a little bit of kind of apple or pear. But by and large, this one is going to be towards banana and baked goods. What I don't get, which I used to get a lot with a lot of the birthday bourbons, I haven't got it the last couple of years, is graham cracker. That was kind of a hallmark of Old Forester for me. I don't really get it on this. I get vanilla, kind of simple syrup, maybe tapioca pudding, something along those lines. And as has been the case last couple of times I've tasted this, a lot of that doesn't carry through. A little bit of cinnamon on there. Good amount of oak, not a ton for a 10-year-old bourbon. But more importantly, that vanilla and custard just kind of disappears. There's kind of a barrel tannin down the middle of the tongue, a little bit of spice on the end. It's a little one-dimensional for me. I would expect a 10-year-old whiskey to be a little more complex than this, and as such, it kind of is a little bit disappointing. You can really dig into this and get a few more flavors. I found that if you splash it with water, it brings out a little bit of that kind of orchard fruit, a little bit more of that. But by and large, this is it is what it is. It's for 10 years old, it disappoints me a little bit. It's a good whiskey. There's certainly nothing wrong with it. It's not flawed. Is it a great whiskey? No. Is it worth the price if you're going to pay 150 bucks plus for it? I mean, the bottle looks cool. People like to see it on your shelf. I don't know that the whiskey itself warrants it based on flavor. Now, if you've got a collection going of all of these, you definitely want to add it to that collection just so you keep the vertical. But definitely when you splash it with water, and that was just a couple of drops, those pears and green apple kind of come out to the forefront. What I found, and we'll see if it carries through to day 3 of tasting this, is that it does kind of kill off a lot of the other notes. Yeah, it brings the tannic, that kind of bitter barrel tannin to the forefront. Kills off any of the sweetness, and you get a little bit of the orchard fruit. So by and large, you don't want to add water to this. 98 proof is about as low as it needs to go. And it's okay. If you're really into birthday bourbon and you want to complete a set, or you just want to get it every year, or this is the only time you come across it, hey, it's your money. I do want to point out also, these challenge coins, we have them for sale from ModernThirst.com. This is our first year releasing these. We only have a handful of these left. We're going to have a group video here end of September, early October, and we're going to announce the final chance to purchase these. There's probably 5 or less of these left. They're $10 each. And so end of October, early November, we're going to draw. The winner of these whoever's number we draw out from the serial number on the bottom, is going to win a bottle of 4-Gate Whiskey Company Batch 5 Foundation. That's a $200 bottle. We're going to send it to you absolutely free. All you have to do is buy this. Go to ModernThirst.com/shop. They're $10 each. That's it. It gets you an entry. We only made 100 of these, and we've kept 15 of them in house that aren't eligible for the drawing. So chances are pretty good. It's better than 1 in 85, as a matter of fact. So not too bad for a $200 bottle. And they make good Glencairn toppers too. So what we're moving on to here is the 150th anniversary. Again, I have batch 3. Batch 3 was supposed to be the spicy one. Jackie Zykan, the master blender and taster who blended these barrels together, she chose this one. There's 53 barrels of batch 3. It was the largest of the 3 batches. The other ones are 47, 49, somewhere in there. Now, when I tasted this, I tasted it online with a number of different media folks, along with Jackie and Campbell Brown just yesterday. I didn't get what they were tasting, but it seemed like everyone who was talking about it had batch 1, which is very fruit forward. It was very popular, so I really need to get a hold of that and try it. But on this one, there's a little bit of red fruit on it. This definitely has less of the sweet that this has, in terms of it doesn't really have the custard and tapioca, but it has that characteristic Brown-Forman kind of graham cracker pie crust type of thing going on. Definitely get some black pepper on that. You get some little bit of oak, not much. It's clearly not as old as the birthday bourbon. There's something else I get there too, and it's been a maybe plum, kind of a dark fruit like that. Prunes and raisins, kind of really dark fruits. Now in the palate, what I've noticed so far with this is that you get a little bit of the dark fruit up front. When it hits the mid palate, it turns bitter. It's kind of a barrel tannin, very high rye spice combines to make a little bit of a bitterness. It's not really awful. It's good. But the finish on this is what really gets me, because it's really medium in length on batch 3. It's not long at all. It's dry, so it dissipates quickly. It kind of sucks that moisture out of your tongue, and you get that prickliness of the tannins along the inside of your mouth. The viscosity on this, kind of mid-range. What I would say is that how this compares to the birthday bourbon, I think I like it more than the birthday bourbon this year. Love the packaging. It's $150, I believe, is what they're charging for this. It's worth it, just because it's hard to find a barrel strength bourbon for $150, especially when you get a neat tube. I'm a little bit of a sucker for packaging, I admit it, and it'll look great on your bar. It's also very unique because you can't find this mash bill at barrel strength very often. You have to get the single barrels from Old Forester, and maybe the couple of their other limited releases might kind of fill that void a little bit. But by and large, this is interesting enough to me where it's worth it to buy. It's in the better than average category for me in terms of flavor. The whole package is kind of neat, and I would buy it if I saw this on shelves. But again, there's only 1,900, not even that. There's 53 barrels of this batch, around 47 of the other two. What I really want is to try batch 1. That was the one that everyone seemed to be kind of going on and on about yesterday. So this one, very good. Not great, but very good. This one just kind of in the good enough range to drink. But we're going to move on to the King of Kentucky. And the King of Kentucky, the first 2 years it came out were fantastic. If you've had different iterations of Old Forester, the two that are kind of my favorite, I like 1870 because it's so very red fruit forward. But the proof kind of gets to me at 90 proof. It's not really, sometimes it just feels like it doesn't have enough, going for it. It doesn't have enough oomph, enough power. And I really like 1920, which is 115 proof, I think. So the two of those together, if they had a love child who was bigger and stronger than they are, that's King of Kentucky for you, at least the first 2 years of it. And on this one, the nose is just huge. There are dark cherries galore on this. And what I get, which is really interesting to me, is that sweetness, some of that same sweetness from the birthday bourbon is in here. But to me, this is a cherry cheesecake because I get that sweetness, that the cream cheese, the sugar, the pie crust, the brown sugar from the crust. I get all of that in there, and then I get this sweet kind of, the cherries with the syrupy sauce on top of them, on top of the cheesecake. It just, if I had to pick something to buy based on the nose of anything I've had recently, it would be this. This is worth a purchase. I think these are $250. They're not cheap. If I had to make a purchase decision just based on the nose, it's without a doubt a buy, because this is one of the best noses I've smelled this year. It's really wonderful. Yeah, cherry cordial, cheesecake, crust, there's just maybe even a hint of cocoa in there. Just really nice. That tapioca pudding. And it comes through on the palate perfectly. This is perfectly balanced. It's strong. It's 130.6 proof, 14 years old. That red fruit's in there. The sweetness is in there. The custard, everything you would want in this. There's tons of vanilla. There's tons of I don't even want to say caramel, because it's more along the lines of a vanilla pudding and tapioca pudding. Maybe a hint of banana, but I just keep going back to this cherry cheesecake, that just kind of decadent sweetness on top of sweetness. And right on the back end of that, you get a little bit of that pepper on the finish. The finish lingers here. This is on the long side, and it's very nice. It's warm. You get a nice hug to it. The proof is, it doesn't drink nearly 130.6 proof. So excellent job blending these barrels. This is a wonderful, this one would be in my finalists for Whiskey of the Year, hands down, no question about it. I absolutely love this whiskey. I'm going to try the last two with water, like I did on the first one, just a splash in each. I've done this a couple of times with each of these before. So we'll see if everything remains the same as my previous tastings. Yeah, so With the 150th, when you splash it with water, the green apples, just like in the birthday bourbon, really come through on the nose. Calms down a little bit of the bitterness. There's still plenty on the periphery, so there's some barrel notes on this one. But actually, with a splash of water, I like this a lot more, which is when I said that this was on the good to almost very good side, it needs just a touch of water. And all that does is it really just calms down the alcohol, the ethanol, just a little bit. And this doesn't drink incredibly hot, but it allows some of that fruitiness to kind of flow through for you. And this batch 3, I think there's a grassiness to it, kind of what it reminds me both on the nose and on the palate is kind of hay. I think of hay bales and being out in a field or in a barn with lots of hay everywhere. It reminds me of going to pick pumpkins with my kids, and you take a hay ride out to the pumpkin patch. That's what this smells like. That kind of sweetness with the corn and the hay follows through, especially with the drop of water. So it winds up being a very nice drink, and at $150, I definitely give it a recommendation to buy if you can find it, if you can afford $150. Now, water on King of Kentucky. I have never ever felt like King of Kentucky needed water. I know it's way up there in proof, but they have traditionally, and even up to this one, they've done such a good job blending the barrels and picking the right barrels to blend together that it just doesn't need it. But when you add water to this on the nose, it takes those cherries, it turns them into maraschino cherries and lighter, sweeter. It calms down some of the cheesecake and some of the vanilla, and it just makes those red fruits sweeter, lighter, and just pop. They just kind of explode in the glass. And it does the same with the palate. So I would recommend add water to the King of Kentucky. Don't add water to the birthday bourbon. Don't add water. Add water to the 150th. Don't add water to the King of Kentucky, and don't do it to the birthday bourbon. Of these, it's going to go in reverse order of which one you should buy. If you can only find one of these, if you can only buy one of these, or if you get the choice, buy the King of Kentucky. Hands down, I know it's expensive. It's $250 or more. It's a great whiskey. It's really worth having. The 150th, as a collector's item and as a decent drinker, $150 isn't that bad these days for a barrel proof whiskey. It's a buy for me too. The Old Forester birthday bourbon, the only way I can recommend you buy this is if you've been collecting them, or you've just always wanted to have one on your shelf and you want that little squat bottle up there. Feel free, but if you're buying it based on what's in the bottle, I can't recommend it. It's okay. And for $100-something bucks, I can't tell you to go out and spend your money on that. Again, none of these are bad. They're not particularly flawed. This one's just just not complex enough. For a 10-year-old whiskey, you just kind of expect more. And when you put it against these other two types of limited releases, it doesn't hold its own at all. And that's not really just due to the proof. This comes back to how does a particular distillate and whiskey, how does it present itself? Well, to be honest, Old Forester doesn't present itself well at 95 proof, at 98 proof, at 100 proof. It doesn't tend to do that unless the blending is really unique and really outstanding, like with the 1870 or the bottled in bond version of it. They really present themselves very well, but standard Old Forester is a fine whiskey at 86 proof. The single barrels at 90 proof are fine, and Signature at 100 is fine. None of them are worth $150. This one, I'd rather buy the 100 proof Signature than spend $150 on this just to get the fancy bottle, is kind of what it comes down to. And there's not enough richness and complexity to it to really force me to make that jump up in price. The other two, however, there's some uniqueness to this Old Forester 150th. It's probably a one-time release. I can't imagine they'll ever do this type of presentation again. They use the amber bottles on this, which harkens back to the original bourbon. I probably should have mentioned this. The 150th anniversary is the 150th anniversary of the first bottled bourbon of Old Forester, the first time they bottled it. So that's what the 150th stands for, and it's definitely worth having. The presentation's excellent. The whiskey itself is good. It's good enough to buy. But when you put it next to the King of Kentucky, it's hard for things to stack up. It's going to be real tough. If I were scoring, this is the Old Forester birthday bourbon. This is day 3 of me tasting it. I've had it anywhere from an 85 to an 87, and I probably think it's more around that 86.5, 87 range. The 150th anniversary is an 87, maybe 87.5, 88 at best. The King of Kentucky, however, is, like I said, It's one of my finalists for Whiskey of the Year. It's a 93, 94 points or better. It's one of the better whiskeys I've had in the last year or so. Outstanding. Really, really, really good. And I know it's expensive. Sometimes you have to pay for the quality. This is one of those instances. So if you find it and you can shell out the cash, do it. If you like what we're doing at Modern Thirst, please consider supporting us at patreon.com. It's patreon.com/ModernThirst. Don't forget to pick up one of the last few coins as ModernThirst.com/shop for a chance to win that 48 Batch 5. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, if you get to taste the other 2 batches, or even this one of the 150th anniversary, leave a comment on the video, leave a comment on our site, leave a comment on Facebook, wherever you found this. Let me know what you think about it, because I'm going to work hard to find at least batch 1, hopefully batch 2. I've heard great things about batch 1, and I just really want to try it. So thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed yourself, and cheers.